Welcome to Couched in Color with Dr. Alfie. I'm your host, Dr. Alfie. We are an audio and video podcast. So if you're listening to us, I want to ask you to please make sure that you subscribe through Libsyn or Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcast fix. And I also want to ask you to subscribe on our YouTube channel because we're also a video podcast. For today's episode, I have a guest who is an Emmy-winning television producer who has begun her own foundation. So she's a founder who is a beautiful human being inside and out. And I'm really excited to bring this conversation to you. So excited, in fact, that we talked for long enough to carve this up into 2 episodes. So please stay with us. I know that you will enjoy this episode. And on the back end, I'll share with you a little bit more about how we're going to close out this season. And stay with us. Welcome everyone to Couched in Color with Dr. Alfie. It is truly an honor for me to introduce my friend to you. I'm going to let her tell you about her story and about who she is and her passion for mental health. But this woman is a superstar. She has a very, she just had this amazing work history, and she's just an amazing person, and I love her as a human being, even though we've only known each other about maybe 4 or 5 years, but she's just amazing and has helped me. I was telling her before we started recording, she's helped me fundamentally change a huge aspect of my life, and so I'm very grateful to her for that, and I'll tell y'all that story in a little bit. But before I do any of that, I would like to welcome the brilliant. I always start with my sisters. They are brilliant and they are beautiful, not one or the other. They're brilliant and the beautiful and the very talented Ms. Nikki Webber Allen. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm so honored to be a part of your podcast. I am so incredibly proud of you for starting it and following your passion, following your dream, and taking that big leap. Because you are able to be more authentic now, and that authenticity is what I think people love about you and why they gravitate to you. And it's so important, particularly in this work, to speak from a place of authenticity. So thank you.
Yes, my goodness, my goodness. Thank you so much. So Nikki, if you wouldn't mind, tell us a little bit about you, and if you can weave in there your passion for mental health in Black people and in communities of color. I really would love for our audience to hear what you want to share with us.
Yeah, absolutely. So I came to this journey about, let's see, it was in 2013. Prior to that, for years, I had been struggling with mild depression. And I say mild because it wasn't that deep depression where you can't get out of bed. I was high functioning, but it was just sort of this lingering sense that something wasn't right? I had lost a passion for life. I had lost passion for the things that I used to really enjoy. I was either overeating or not eating. Like it was always one extreme or the other, which was very different from sort of what my normal was, right? Mm-hmm. So I'd been struggling with this mild sense of depression. And I also had a very strong anxiety, social anxiety in particular, which I didn't even know I had. To me, it was just normal. It was just what I knew. So I went to see a therapist, and it was a Black woman in DC who I loved her because we related so well as sisters and friends. Mm-hmm. So I really trusted her, which I think is really important. And she's the first person to tell me, Nikki, you're depressed. Mm-hmm. And I rejected the notion when she said it, right? Because I had that whole, idea of this, I'm the strong Black woman, right? Mm-hmm. And I looked down, I thought it was a character flaw. I thought having somebody who was depressed wasn't trying hard enough, wasn't strong enough, they were weak. All these misconceptions that I think people in general have, but it's really strong within communities of color, within Black communities and Latinx communities. I think that, and Asian communities as well, it is very, very stigmatized. So I really rejected the notion. However, I trusted her. So she was able to convince me if I just kept coming to therapy, maybe we could get to the bottom of what was, ailing me, I guess I should say. And I decided, I wanted to get better. I wanted to feel better. So because I trusted her, I decided to keep going.
Mm-hmm.
And it was through that process that I started realizing, you know what, she's right. And I started doing research on my own about what depression was, what it looked like. I had no language for it. No one in my family ever talked about it. None of my friends ever talked about it. You know, back then, people are talking about it more now. I think it's getting more socially acceptable, thank goodness.
Yes.
Back then, no. And we're talking about, this is prior to 2013. So this
Okay.
was probably 15 years ago.
Okay.
People were not talking about it, and especially not people that look like us.
Mm-hmm.
I kept going, but there was, because of the stigma, I kept it to myself. I didn't talk to my family about it. I didn't talk to anybody about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But at least I did work on myself
Mm-hmm.
in tandem with this therapist.
Mm-hmm.
Cut to 2013. I got a call from my mom one day, and she said, Paul is gone. Paul was my 27 at the time year-old nephew, and he died by suicide.
Mm-hmm.
I had no idea that he was struggling with depression. And I immediately was consumed with guilt because I knew that I had been struggling too. And I never talked to him and shared my story with him. And he never told me. And we were very, very close. And we never talked to each other about it. So from that moment on, I was like, you know what? We cannot have so much stigma around this topic that within families, we're not even sharing our stories to the people that we love. So immediately I started a nonprofit called I Live For Foundation Inc. And our mission was to normalize conversations around depression, anxiety, and other mental disorders, specifically for young people of color. And I just really wanted to create a safe space for us to share stories. My background is as a TV producer. Okay. So that's what I'm a storyteller by trade. Mm-hmm. So what I wanted to do was use my expertise to cobble stories together and share them with other people. And we've had a lot of success doing it. I love doing it. We do a lot of events. We call them movement, music, and mental health, where we go to different cities and have these experiences. I was going to say events, but they're really experiences where young people come. And by young, I mean college age to maybe like mid-30s. And they come out, and I get local bands, local musicians from their town to perform. And people sit around like sort of old school salon style, where you're kind of sitting around on beam chairs and that kind of thing. We've got healthy foods and like fruit smoothies and that kind of thing, and where people can sit around and just we talk. And we've got we call it. We don't call it a panel. We call it a heart talk. And it's got different people who will share their stories, just to kind of prompt the rest of the people in attendance to start opening up about theirs. And what's been so amazing about these events is that they've been all extremely diverse. You know, again, all the populations I talked about before, Black and brown people. And also some white people too. They understand that this is a conversation around our trauma. But they still find the connection, because I think it's what I said about you earlier. When you're telling authentic stories, everyone can connect to it, right? So I think people find those connection points within the conversations. But what I've loved about these events is that, or experiences, is that people always come back to me and say, I have never in my life been in a room full of people who look like us, talking openly and sharing these stories. And the other thing that I find really different and really, really cool, and I'm really proud of with these events, is that a lot of the kids are actually quite successful. And there've been a lot of college kids and young professionals that have had so much pressure on them because they're used to being only Black, or the first in their family to go to college, or the first Latinx person to whatever it is. It's a lot of firsts or onlys. So they've had so much pressure put on them, and there's so much anxiety around that, but they've never felt like there was a safe space to talk about it. So when they come to our experiences, I live for movement, music, and mental health experiences, finally they find a community that they can relate to, and they don't have to pretend like they've got it all together for like almost for the first time in their lives. They can be honest about what they're feeling and feel supported and feel connected to other people that are actually going through the same thing. So sorry if that was a long way around, but yeah, so that's kind of what we've been up to.
Oh boy, there's so many things about that, the experiences that you create. I'll just start there. And it makes me think about how much, I don't want to make it be like really heavy, but how much pain there is out there that's untapped, that's unmentioned, right? That's unspoken, that's not public. And I think, one of the connections that you and I have as Black women is similar to what you create for people through the experiences. And that is this opportunity to be vulnerable and be authentic in our pain all at the same time. So I promised I was going to tell this story. So you and I had the experience, and I haven't been 100% open about why I left Georgetown when I did, or what the circumstances were. I don't really talk about that publicly because I think there probably is a big piece of it that's still painful for me. It's, and I'm still sort of working through it. And so we went to a health food like restaurant. You're good for that. You are good with the healthy food. That's not me, honey. I do junk food all the time. So you had me at this health food place, and I had avocado toast, and it was the bomb. We're not gonna talk about that. Oh my God, it was so bomb. Oh my God, it was so good. And then I kind of got obsessed with it after that. So we were sitting there, and we were talking, and I was sharing with you what some of my struggles were. And, I said, I don't know, we just had a pause in the conversation, and something came up, like I said, I don't know what I would do if I'm not an academic. And I know you remember this, I talk about it all the time. But you're the person who said, well, Alfie, I'm not going to get it right. But you were like, Alfie, just because you leave academia doesn't mean the academic you are leaves you. And I was just like, I was just like burst into tears, because it was the first time, honestly, I think my family had been trying to tell me like bits and pieces like that, but I don't think I had ever had anyone, especially somebody like you with your professional background as a producer, right? I knew enough to know this is a smart woman, right? This is an accomplished woman. This is a woman who's won awards for her work. So we're not talking about chump change. This is somebody who's like a superstar. So if she's saying to me, right, woman to woman, and we had talked a little bit about, both of our struggles with anxiety. I am very open about the fact I'm super anxious, and I know it's in my family. But had you not said that, I'm pretty sure I never would have had the courage to leave and do what I'm doing now. And so after you shared that with me, I literally was like, okay, I got it. And I just like got out a calendar, and I literally started marking days, and I had a plan, and I was just like, I can do this. And I created a strategy. And so I have to say, while we're sitting here on recording, I have to say thank you. I've thanked you a million times, but I got to say thank you again, so we can like just have it like for all posterity. So thank you, Nikki, for like really getting my mind right and helping me just, elevate. Like it really elevated me to another level. And so I'm wondering for you, just as you described, what you shared about how the experiences, I'm going to say events, experiences help and support people. Have you found, like this story I just shared, have you found that there are people in your life who have been able to do that for you? Because you did that for me. And I try to do it for people, but I don't know if I really helped anybody. But are there people in your life who are able to uplift you and support you? Like you talked about your therapist. Are there other people in your life who've been able to do that for you? And what kind of things do they do that make you feel like I am loved, I am cared for, I am seen, even with the anxiety and depression as a Black woman, I am seen?
Yeah. First, I have to say thank you for sharing that story, because you have no idea how good that makes me feel. Like to affect positive change in someone's life, to me, is why we're here on this earth. I'm gonna get all misty.
I know, me too. Don't do it, because I don't want this makeup to melt off, girl. It took too long.
It's true. So that I feel hugely, hugely honored. And you yourself, are a brilliant, successful, beautiful person. And I see the sky is the limit for you. So if I have played any little minuscule part in that, I am truly honored. So, and thank you for sharing that.
Of course.
But yes, of course, like there are too many people that I could even name that have played that role in my life. I am somebody, I love a sisterhood.
Yes.
I've got, and you are part of that. Like there are so many women in my life, whether I talk to them daily or check in once a year, that influence me, even if it's not even in what they say, but in how they live their lives, right? Because something that's really important to me is I want to and I'm very intentional about surrounding myself with people who are trying to push it to the next level. If you are not trying to push, I don't want to say I don't have time for you, but that's not where I want to put my energy. I'll put it that way. So I really try to be intentional about nurturing relationships and nurturing relationships that are important to me. And the relationships that are most important to me are the ones with particularly women who are trying to make the world a better place. So we will connect, like you and I even connect every, few months, real supportive conversations. And sometimes it's just to laugh and take the pressure off, right? So that to me is really important as well. So yeah, there's so many people in my life that hold that position for me. And then yes, as you already mentioned, and my therapist, faux show. Like so very important.
Yeah. So what was that process like for you, if you could share a little bit, finding someone that you felt like you could, I don't know, click with or resonate with? Was it a difficult process? How did you go about finding the one person now, or any of the people you've worked with? How did you find those people and make that work?
Well, it's a good question. Because initially, back when I was probably like 20, I was very young, like maybe 21 or 22. I was living in LA, working in production in LA. And I knew even then something was off. And I went to a clinic. I'll never forget it. It was the Jewish Women's Association. It was called. But it was exactly. I'm over mine. Right. So yeah, the Jewish Women's Clinic in LA, and I sat with it's not obvious, but she was not Black. And I told her some of my story. It felt to me very sort of voyeuristic on her part.
Yes.
Like she was connecting with me in an authentic way. It felt to me more like she was sort of fascinated with my story. Right. And I didn't necessarily, again, have the language for that at the time. It just didn't feel right to me. So that was enough for me to say at the time, this therapy stuff does not work. I'm not going, it doesn't work. It's hooey, not going. So sorry. Let's not going. So it was, easily a decade or more later a little more than a decade later that I went again. So what I did, I had sense enough the next time I said, I think it has to be a Black person for me, because I didn't want anybody who may have stereotypes around who they thought a Black person should be. I didn't want people looking at me through that lens and pathologizing anything based on stereotypes that they held or biases that they had. So it's like, I need a Black person, and I would feel more comfortable with a woman. So what I did is I went on Psychology Today's website. I just started looking at, I was living in DC at the time. So I put in DC. Then there was no way at the time, I don't know if there is now, but to say Black woman. So I just started scrolling, looking at, there is? Oh, so that's even better.
But that's new. That's only been in the last 2 or 3 years.
Okay, yeah. So, because that didn't exist. So I just started scrolling through, but I still think that this is an important step.
Yep.
I started scrolling through and looking at the pictures. I'm a very like vibey person.
Yep.
So it's like, well, just from like looking at how somebody represents themselves and reading up, of course, about them, like where were they educated, what's their philosophy. And so I saw this gorgeous sister named Tamara Jackson.
Okay.
Gorgeous, little girl with a little fly haircut. How cute she was. I know that sounds so superficial, but
no, not at all.
I was like, oh, she looks like somebody I would want to be friends with, right? It just felt like it would be a connection. So then when I read everything, I liked where she went to school. And then when I read further, it talked about how she had I don't remember the exact language, but it was something about, she blended spirituality in practice.
Yes.
Right? So I was like,
yes.
ooh,
yes.
okay.
Yes.
This is fun right here. Yeah, she talked about meditation, and she blended Eastern medicines, practices, not medicine, Eastern practices with sort of the more Western philosophies, or however you say that. So I just thought, okay, this is who I want to see, because I was really hesitant, like medication and that kind of stuff. I was like, don't do that.
Right.
I've since realized if you need medication, you need to take the medication.
Yes.
But at that point, I was like, I didn't want to hear anything about that. So this woman was talking about, meditation and things like that. So yeah, when I called her, she said, come in. And from the moment I sat in that chair, it felt like she was an old friend.
Oh.
So we did a lot of really hard, painful work together.
Yeah.
But when I tell you, it was so worth it and so productive. And she's really changed my life in so many ways. So yeah.
Oh, so kudos to that sister. Everything that you said, it gives me chills, because I have to be honest and say that in our field, when we're in training, it's almost like it's systemic oppression or systemic racism, because what people encourage us to do in training as mental health professionals, and I think it doesn't matter what the alphabet soup is behind your name. If you're trained as a mental health professional, you get some of this. And the messaging is more about, it's not about you. It's not about sort of who you are as a person and the image that you project. It's more about, do you have the clinical skills, right? And that is just so far from the truth, right? You do need clinical skills to be good, but you also need to connect with people. And there are different ways. Like I have this big thing, I always say there are different ways of knowing. There are multiple ways of knowing. There's not one way. There's not one way to be a therapist. There's not one way to be a psychologist or a psychiatrist or a clinical social worker. There are lots of ways. And I think what you shared and what this sister does resonated with you. It resonates with me, because that's part of who we are, I think, as Black people, right? So, the clothes that you wear, the jewelry that you put on, the way you wear your hair, when you wear your hair natural, all of those things send signals to people. And I just feel like it's so wonderful to hear you say, because I promise you, there's some graduate student out there or somebody in training right now who's being told, you need to wear a suit and you got to look a certain way, you wear tiny earrings,
And that would not have resonated with me.
Right.
If she was all stuffy, it would not, stuffy looking to me, it wouldn't have resonated. And I do something you just said made me think of something else about Black people.
Yeah.
There's a certain knowing that I think we have, right? That's innate. And I'm sure probably everybody has it, but I feel like ours is really strong. And maybe I'm not, but
right.
Deep knowing, right? And if you just trust that, and I'm telling you, when I saw her picture, I was like, this is the one. I just knew it immediately. And I'll tell you something else too. After I moved out of DC and needed to find another therapist. Someone had recommended somebody else. So this time it was a white guy, white man. And I said, you know what, I'm not sure if this is going to be a good fit, but let me just try it. Yeah. So I went, and this is not to say that you can't have that, because you do know I've got some friends who love their therapists who are not. So you just have to figure out what works for you, right?
That's right. That's
But
right.
I went to him, and I will never forget it. I actually really liked him a lot
Okay.
for, and I still do. I think he was a good guy, and I think
Yeah.
he meant well. But the day I stopped going to him, I went to him for maybe a couple of months.
Okay.
And I remember talking to him, and it may have been around, I don't know if it was Eric Garner.
Mm-hmm.
It was possibly Eric Garner, I'm not sure, but whomever it was, I remember talking to him about just how broken I was feeling. All of the police violence that I saw constantly, and how I was scared for my family, I was scared for myself. And I was just I had so much rage because police were never held accountable and nothing was ever done about it. And I'll never forget, he said to me, "Don't you think you're exaggerating just a little?" Right. This was my therapist, who I had entrusted with my most personal stories and feelings and emotions. And I felt so undermined and just like, oh, you know what I mean? It hurt me in so many ways to have been that vulnerable and to share the story and be faced with an enormous microaggression. Well, that's probably an oxymoron, but macroaggression.
It was. That's exactly right.
That, right?
Yep.
So that's why, for me, I think I got to stick with the Sistahs.
Yeah.
So I have found another doing the same method, going through and looking, and I found another one. I'm down in Atlanta now. Down here in Atlanta is phenomenal. Yeah.
Thanks for watching part 1 of this episode in Couched in Color. Come back next week for part 2.